All right, everybody. Time to come in, sit down, and get educated and learn how to change your lives. Now, this guy's up here on the stage with me. I've known ever since I've been in Oklahoma. If you ever need to have your shoulder fixed, he's the best man in the country. But he's working on becoming the best person on nutrition in the country. And you're about to learn a lot of things that you didn't know about nutrition, and hopefully will save your life. This is Dr. Jimmy Conway.
Thanks, Rob. So as we go through this presentation, as I'm doing this, if you have a question, don't hesitate to raise your hand. This is not a formal presentation by any stretch of the imagination. The reason we do this is to hopefully inform you, educate you about how basically we've been led astray as to what is healthy and what's not healthy. So I used to think I knew what was healthy, and it almost killed me. And that's kind of the start of my story. When I first started doing these seminars, we started them because I was spending too much time in my office talking about nutrition to my patients. And you might think, what does nutrition have to do with the shoulder? Well, it has everything to do with it. We've known since 1965 that rotator cuff tears start in an area of porous blood supply. And you just don't develop blood vessel disease in your heart, you develop it in every vessel in your body. And so the rotator cuff doesn't just tear, it degenerates and then it tears. And so nutrition has everything to do with that. And, you know, I used to say when I started practice, I never saw a rotator cuff tear in somebody younger than 40. Unfortunately, I've seen it in teenagers now. And it has to do with the food that we're putting into our bodies. You know, those of us that are the Christian faith, we believe that our body is God's temple. And unfortunately, what we put in our mouth has the power to create disease or the power to create health. And so hopefully I'll be able to enlighten you about what is actually best for all humans to eat, what we were meant to eat, what we were designed to eat. And that is whole plant food, without question. Brother Will Rogers said the problem ain't what people don't know, it's what people know that ain't so. That's the problem. And that definitely was the problem with me, because I thought I knew what was healthy, and it almost killed me. It's estimated that you'll retain about 5% of what I say up here today unless you actively engage with this discussion. And so most of us know somebody that's died of heart disease or cancer. It kills most of us. It's estimated that about 85% of all premature death in the United States could be prevented by eating a whole food plant-based diet. So what does that look like in real numbers? 2012, slightly over 1 million of us died of heart disease and cancer. And if you look at that on a daily basis, so this last week we had a tragedy in the air. A lady lost her life, and it made worldwide news. But the equivalent of a little over 1 million people dying every day or every year of premature death is the equivalent of 10 jumbo jets crashing every day, 365 days a year. How long would it take you not to fly? But we get on this bus called the Standard American Diet, and we're led down the path of disease and destruction by what we eat. It's not your genetics. You don't have to race for the cure because we know what causes it. It's what you eat. It's what we all eat. It's what we grew up eating, what we thought was healthy. The single most important nutrient to avoid, if you want to avoid cancer, heart disease, diabetes, autoimmune diseases, it's not fat, it's animal protein. That is the causative agent. That's what's making us fat, sick, and nearly dead. Killed my dad, killed my mother, killed most of my family. So I always thought that I was a prisoner of my genetics. that I was destined to get heart disease. And lo and behold, that did happen. And one of the reasons I really want to go through this discussion is actually to empower you, to not be a victim of your genetics or your upbringing, but to actually empower you to overcome bad genetics. So I was born with the propensity to have very high triglycerides. Runs in my family. And along with high triglycerides comes heart disease. So what we really have found is if you really want to fight disease, you want to do it with whole food. If it has a mother or a face, we don't eat it. If it's processed, we don't eat it. Eggs and milk are animal products. We don't eat it. No added sugar and no added oil. There are no healthy oils. There are no healthy oils. There are no healthy oils. And I'll guarantee you somebody's going to ask me about coconut oil. The miracle of coconut oil is that it's still thought of as, in some instances, as being healthy. It's not healthy. It's the most saturated fat that there is. And the more saturated fat you eat, the higher your low-density lipoprotein, or LDL, is. Now, LDL is actually the thing you really need to worry about. HDL doesn't matter what your level is. It's a non-causative correlated statistic. So it doesn't cause you to be healthy. It doesn't cause you to be unhealthy, no matter what that HDL level is. The LDL level, on the other hand, is what actually causes heart disease, in that when it becomes oxidized, then it starts a process of building up plaque in the artery. And so I'm sure you've all heard of oxidation. That's how metal rusts. Well, that happens in your body too. And as that LDL particle becomes oxidized, then it starts the process of laying down plaque in the arteries. And there are also, when we're talking about what's healthy to eat, if we eat bread or pasta, we want it to be whole grain, but we don't want to eat a lot of that because it is a processed food product. We want unprocessed food. So we want real food. And fruit juice is the equivalent of Coca-Cola when you take it into your body. Orange juice is not a healthy thing to be consuming. Now, oranges are very healthy. Orange juice is not, because the fiber in the orange has been removed to produce the orange juice. It's just like processed sugar. And so processed sugar products kills the enzyme that creates a chemical in the lining of your arteries that allows the arteries to relax, and that's called nitric oxide. So added sugar and added oil kills nitric oxide synthase, which is the enzyme that creates the nitric oxide. Nitric oxide was discovered in 1992. It was the molecule of the year in 1992. I didn't even know we had molecules of the year. But it was first called vascular relaxing factor. And now we know that you can't have a healthy tendon in your body without appropriate levels of nitric oxide. And the food that we eat kills the production of that chemical. And it's only there for just a little while, so your body has to continually produce it, or then you develop problems. So I'm also not that big on supplements. Now, curcumin is one of the over 300 bioactive compounds in turmeric. If you go into a health food store, you'll see bottles of curcumin touted as pain relievers. It cures cancer. It does all this stuff, but that is us in our arrogance, thinking that we can isolate one little compound. But look at the cancer-fighting ability of turmeric versus curcumin. I don't know that my pointer is that strong. But turmeric, because of all the other different bioactive compounds in it, turmeric is synergistic with all those compounds. And so it's much more effective than curcumin at fighting cancer, at fighting inflammation, at relieving your body of pain. Turmeric is very healthy. It's been used in Ayurvedic medicine for over 10,000 years. So maybe they knew something about health. If it came from a plant, eat it. If it's made in a plant, don't eat it. It's kind of like to keep it simple. Michael Greger, and I highly recommend this guy's website. It's called nutritionfacts.org. It's free. He has a searchable database, and at the end, he has these little videos. At the end of the video, he'll have sources cited. So if you click on sources cited, and you can actually go to the articles that he is referencing to produce these videos, and you can read the science yourself. He says the best kept secret in medicine is under the right conditions, the body can heal itself. Go figure. Our bodies were made to heal themselves if we allow it, if we get out of the way. So how's the fastest way to cure a disease? So actually a water-only fast, and they've been doing that for tens of thousands of years too. So I recently have really started kind of studying the concepts of fasting, and it's pretty remarkable what it does to our bodies and how quickly a water-only fast will let you heal most any condition. So eat like your life depends on it, because it does. So if food is the cause of our chronic diseases, and it is, food can be the cure. So you want to choose life or death. When I go in a grocery store, I'm very pro-life. I don't want that dead, decaying animal flesh that I used to love to ingest. And I didn't quit eating those steaks because they didn't taste good. I quit eating them because they almost killed me. So Dr. T. Colin Campbell is one of the foremost nutrition researchers in the world, says that everything in food works together to create either health or disease. And the more we think a single chemical, or you can say a single nutrient, characterizes a whole food, the more we stray into idiocy. Now, we're going to stray a little bit into idiocy, and we're going to start talking about some of the nutrients, but that's just for the sake of discussion. But I don't want you to lose sight of the fact that what I'm really talking about is food. So the 1990s, there was an organization called Focus on the Family. I want it to be Focus on the Food, because you either feed it or fight it. That is, you either feed chronic disease or you fight it based on what you put in your mouth. Now, this slide may be a little hard for you guys to see, but this compares the nutrients in broccoli versus sirloin versus romaine lettuce and versus kale. Where do you get your protein? That's what I always get asked. Where do you get your protein? Well, you know what? I get my protein the same place that the largest land animals on earth get theirs, from plants. Where does the hippo get its protein? Where does the elephant get its protein? Where does the giraffe get its protein? Those aren't carnivores, and they have plenty of muscle. But actually, on a calorie basis, and that's how your body looks at food, romaine lettuce has over twice the protein that sirloin steak has. Yeah, I said that right. Romaine lettuce, now, don't go out and buy some romaine lettuce right now, because there's a little problem with it, but the other green leafy vegetables, so far we haven't found any problem with. And if you're not aware, there's a recall on romaine lettuce because of E. coli contamination. Now, the lettuce didn't produce that E. coli. That came from an animal. But there's a national recall on it. But romaine lettuce has over twice the protein that sirloin does. You know, Popeye was right. He's strong to the finish because he eats his spinach. So 52% of the calories in spinach are protein. And you can't find that in any animal food. As a matter of fact, 100% of all protein is initially made by plants. An animal doesn't take sunlight and then mixes it with some atmospheric nitrogen and produce a chain of protein, amino acids. An animal we don't do that. There's not an animal on the face of the earth that does that. All protein, 100% of protein comes from plants initially. and then it may be recycled. So this actually came to me in either a nightmare or a dream. I woke up one night thinking about the fantastic facts of fabulous food, the effing F's of nutrition, and I said, I better write this down or I'm going to forget it. But you'll either find a way or find an excuse. And if you find a way, you'll find it with your fingers, your feet, and your forks. With your fingers, how you snack. With your feet, exercise is medicine. If you don't have known heart disease, you need 30 minutes of moderate exercise a day to be healthy. So how do we define moderate? That is exercising where you can carry on a conversation. That's the definition of it. And so you need 30 minutes. If you have known heart disease, you need an hour a day. And I'm going to let you in on a little secret. So what I'm talking about up here primarily is heart disease and cancer. It's estimated that all 100% of us in this room have cancerous cells in our body right now. So are you going to feed it or are you going to fight it? It's also a known fact, by the age of 15, 100% of Americans have heart disease. So it's not a matter of do you have heart disease or not, because you do if you've eaten a standard American diet. The question is that heart disease going to become symptomatic, and are you going to be one of the unlucky 50%ers? Today, in the United States, 50% of heart disease is diagnosed at the time of sudden death. Now, I'm an orthopedic surgeon. The joke in medicine is the definition of a double-blind study is Dr. Unsel and myself looking at an EKG. Two orthopods looking at an EKG, and there's a lot of truth to that. Here's what I know about EKGs. If there's no squiggly lines, it's bad. That's about it. Now, sometimes I can pick up V-fib, but it's got to be really staring me right in the face. But, you know, being diagnosed with heart disease at the time of sudden death, in my mind, is a bit too late. Maybe one heartbeat. So we really want to focus on the food. Forget the nutrients, forget the fat, forget the protein, forget the carbohydrates. Who's been told that carbs make you fat? How does your body store carbs? Not as fat. Stores it as glycogen in your liver and your muscles. It's not very efficient for your body to convert that into fat. Now, if you're eating processed carbs, that changes the insulin response in your pancreas. That makes you more prone to store fat. But what you really do is you store the fat you eat. Some more of the effing F's is the fat you eat is the fat you wear. For every 100 grams of fat you eat, your body stores 97. And if you think about it, we had to be fat storage machines back when there was feast or famine, or we would all died out. So those of us that are here today are the results of our ancestors' ability to store fat when there was feast and to survive the famine. It's estimated that today in the United States, the average human can go 60 days without food before they enter a starvation mode. That's how much stored fat we have in our body, that we can go 60 days with our body starting to turn protein into carbohydrates, and that's the definition of starvation. So, focus on the food. Forget the proteins, forget the carbs, forget the fat. You know, one day this fat's good for you, the other day that fat's bad for you. So what the processed food companies want to do is to keep you confused. And I used to say the processed food companies of the 2000s were the tobacco companies of the 1950s, until I found out that most of the processed food companies are actually owned by the tobacco companies. And if you don't think they know addiction, they know addiction to a T. The number one addiction in the United States is not the opioid crisis. As a matter of fact, Prescriptions for opioids have fallen every year since 2012, and all of a sudden we have this crisis. There is a problem, don't get me wrong. But the number one addiction in the United States that kills more people than all the other addictions combined is food addiction. And I am a prime example of that. So ever since I was a little kid, if I got very hungry, I would get a horrible headache, I would start sweating, and then I would become nauseated and I literally would start throwing up. That's what I associated with hunger my whole life. Those are not signs of hunger. Those are signs of withdrawal. I was withdrawing from my drug of choice, which was salt, sugar, and fat. You give me a steak, and I'd eat the fat around the steak before I'd eat the meat. I loved the taste of fat. I was addicted. I didn't know that, but it was true. I really was. So Hippocrates is the father of shoulder surgery. He's also the father of medicine. Hippocrates describes 7 different ways to reduce a dislocated shoulder, one of which is still the most common way a dislocated shoulder is reduced on the field of athletic competition, and that's the old foot in the armpit method. But that was Hippocrates that described that. He described a surgical technique that we're still using a variant of today. And he recognized, he was born in 460 BC, he died in 370 BC. He recognized that if the body didn't produce scar tissue, the shoulder was prone to redislocate. But he said there are in effect 2 things, to know and to believe one knows. To know is science, to believe one knows is ignorance. I said it's insanity because I believed I knew what was healthy. And it almost killed me. Came pretty close. So about 9 years ago, it'll be 9 years this August, I woke up with left arm pain. Now, I played college football, and at 172 pounds and 5'10", I didn't realize I was too small to play small college football, but I beat my body up pretty badly. And I've always had right arm pain from neck injuries. I mean, the way we're taught to tackle, you'd be thrown out of a game now. But that was the tackle with the crown of your head. So I always said, if I ever had left arm pain like I had right arm pain, I'd be afraid I was having a heart attack. Well, one morning I woke up with left arm pain, and it didn't feel like anything I'd ever felt before. It was kind of the throb in my hand and kind of a little bit down the arm, and said, oh no, here goes. Because I have a really, really, really strong family history of heart disease. It's genetic, right? The other thing you inherit from your parents is how you eat. And so I grew up in southern Oklahoma. My mother was a great cook, but everything was fried. And if it wasn't fried, if it was a vegetable, it had bacon grease in it. Or it had Velveeta cheese on it. I mean, I never ate a vegetable that wasn't adulterated with something like that. I couldn't imagine eating a plain vegetable. Ugh. But I woke up with left arm pain, so I went to see a guy that I was not friends with. I didn't want to go to a cardiologist that I knew. And so he drew my cholesterol, and it was 494, and my triglycerides were over 3,200. He said, I've never seen triglycerides that high. And I said, I know, I'm an overachiever. But he said, we need to do a stress test. Okay. I failed that. I guess I wasn't an overachiever there. But he scheduled me to have a cardiac catheterization. So they can either go in an artery in your arm or in your groin. And me, they went in my groin. So they thread this little catheter up into my heart, and I had an 85% blockage of my left anterior descending, which is known as the widowmaker, an 80% a little further downstream, and a 70% of my right main coronary. I had another artery that was 100% blocked, but I had revascularized around it, so I didn't think I needed to have that bypassed. But he thought these blockages were too big to stent and recommended that I have a triple bypass. And I had the arteriogram on a Monday. I was scheduled for bypass that Friday. You won't see a scar on my chest. I made a big mistake. There is a website that's called PubMed, and you can go on this website and you can get all the peer-reviewed scientific literature that you want. Anybody can go on there and do that. Well, I got on PubMed and I started looking for failure rates of CABG surgeries. So CABG, coronary artery bypass graft, was invented at the Cleveland Clinic in the 1950s. So I found this article that was a meta-analysis, and it was a 43% failure rate after 12 to 18 months. 43% failure rate after 12 to 18 months. And if it failed, you were 10 times more likely to die or 10 times more likely to have a heart attack. So what that told me right off the bat was it didn't matter how I was going to treat this heart disease initially, I was going to have to change how I ate. My wife ran into one of my partners who had had a similar experience a year before, and he said, you need to get him the book called The China Study and have him read that. This was on the Friday before I had this cath on that Monday, and I actually read the China Study that Saturday before I had the cath. And it actually made me angry as I read this book because there's information in that book that has been known for decades, and I had never heard about it. About what really causes heart disease, what really causes cancer. Are you kidding me? It's animal protein? Now, as an athlete, I grew up in Ada, Oklahoma. I don't know if any of you guys are native Okies, but football is the true religion of Ada, Oklahoma. And I worshiped that. And, you know, I can't tell you how much stuff I put in my body to try to build muscle. But we literally worked out all the time trying to build muscle. And it was always some form of animal protein that I would ingest. And it really didn't help me, but I didn't know that at the time. I believed I was doing everything I could to be as strong and as fast as I could be. But after I read the China Study, and in that book is mentioned a book called Prevent and Reverse Heart Disease. I couldn't work that Tuesday after having that arteriogram because they didn't want me standing up. So I went to Barnes & Noble and I found the book Prevent and Reverse Heart Disease. I literally read that in one day, and I called my cardiologist and said, I'm not having surgery. And you would have thought I said I was going to shoot myself in the head. He was convinced I was going to sign my death warrant. He gave me every phone number he ever even thought about having. Gave me a bottle of liquid nitroglycerin because he knew I was going to have a heart attack. But literally one day, I ate everything bad there was to eat. And the next day, we went totally plant-based, all whole food, plant-based, no added oil, no added sugar. Now, I have to tell you, besides just being addicted to fat, I was also addicted to sugar. And I used to drink a 6-pack of Code Red a day. That's Mountain Dew Code Red. And then I got the bright idea I need to mix that with Red Bull. I was also on 3 antihypertensives, and on a good day, my blood pressure was 160 over 100. One day I was doing surgery, and I kept saying, man, I got a headache. Man, I got a headache. Finally, the anesthesiologist said, come here and let me check your blood pressure. It's 220 over 120. As far back as we did high school physicals, I was always hypertensive. Nobody ever told me what caused that high blood pressure. Maybe the only nutrition advice I ever got from a doctor was you might want to cut down on your salt. Really? Unless you're African American, you're probably not salt sensitive hypertensive. More than likely, it has very little to play in your hypertension. It's animal protein and animal fat and added oil, the cooking oils, that cause the high blood pressure. So, one day eating everything bad, everything good, I thought. I mean, it sure tasted good. The next day, going whole food, plant-based, within 6 months, my total cholesterol had dropped to 115. My LDL, and I told you that's the number you really need to concentrate on. It doesn't really matter your particle size that much. You get that LDL low, and your risk of dying of heart disease is very low. So 15 was as low as they could measure on this test. I was taking a statin at that time called Crestor. Since that time, both triglycerides and cholesterol are under 100 on no medicine. My blood pressure runs about 115 over 70 on no medicine. Now, how can that be? So for 53 years, I salted my arteries every time I opened my mouth and put food in it. Within 6 months, my body was able to reverse that, to heal itself when I quit abusing it with the food I was eating. So Hippocrates also said, let food be thy medicine and medicine thy food. This Hippocrates dude was pretty smart. So what is nutrition? It's a symphony. And if you think you can take one little particle, or like I did, I thought, well, I can eat bad and take these vitamins, I'll be okay, right? Yeah, I was deceiving myself. So what are the nutrients? The macronutrients are the nutrients that provide calories to your body. Protein, carbohydrates, fat, and alcohol I listed because it's 7 calories per gram. Now it's empty. It's kind of like sugar, refined sugar. So there's no nutrients in the alcohol, but it does provide calories. They're not good calories, but your body can burn that. And then the micronutrients, the vitamins, the minerals, the phytonutrients. Now that actually is where the magic in nutrition occurs. Phyto means plant. You're not going to find a phytonutrient in any animal product. They don't exist. And the antioxidants. How do you keep LDL from oxidizing? Well, we were provided a perfect way to do that. Green leafy vegetables. As a matter of fact, the green leafy vegetables are also the key to preventing cancer, as you'll see in just a little bit. So what about fat? There's saturated fat, and that's the fat that's solid at room temperature. And fats are chains of carbon atoms that have hydrogen bound everywhere. A single carbon atom can have 4 bonds, and if it's bonded to another carbon atom, then there's 3 areas that hydrogen can bond to it. And if the hydrogen is completely bonded to those chains of carbons, we call that a saturated fat. It's saturated with hydrogen atoms. And saturated fat's not really good for you because it increases your LDL, it decreases your HDL, but that really doesn't have any bearing in your risk of dying. It's the LDL that does. Saturated and trans fats are the ones that increase your LDL. Yes? I'm sorry? Water? Well, yes, water is a very important nutrient since our bodies are primarily water. But since you don't really get, water's essential for life, but you don't have a lot of nutrients in it in general. Now, some of the water around various places that forms where there's limestone, you get different types of calcium minerals in it, and that can be healthy or not. Because if your water's too hard, then you actually increase your risk of calcifying the plaque in your body. So areas of the world that have really high calcium in their water have higher heart attack and cardiac death rates. But water is very important. I probably ought to list that as one of the nutrients. You can't live without water. You can go 60 days without food, but you can't go 60 days without water. Well, water softeners can be a little dangerous. It depends on what they exchange the ions with. So probably alkaline water is the best. You know, your body goes to great lengths to maintain its pH level. And then pH is, you know, either alkaline or acidic. And your body wants to maintain this level at all costs. So what's real acidic that we put in our body? Well, just so happens to be animal protein. The amino acids in animal protein form sulfuric acid in your body. Sulfuric acid in its pure form can eat through most anything. Now, one of the ways we know that we weren't meant to eat meat was the pH of our stomach is nowhere near as acidic as an obligate carnivore. So like a cat, a big lion, obligate carnivore, pH in the stomach. If we had that pH in our stomach, it'd eat a hole in our stomach like that. But the cats are designed to break down the meat real quickly. Their intestines are very short because they want to get rid of that product. We have 22 feet of small intestines. They dissolve in that, their stomach acid is very acid, very acidic. So saturated fat, then we have trans fats. Trans fats, most of these are man-made, but 50% of our consumption of trans fat occurs from animal flesh. All animal flesh has trans fat in it. Now, here's our government and its brilliance. USDA says that we want to consume zero amount of trans fat. How can you do that? By eating plants. But the USDA can't say that because anytime they've gotten close to saying that, there's been a big cost paid for it by the big ag. They attack. They say don't eat any trans fats, but consume low-fat meat products. Doesn't matter. You're still going to get trans fats. So if you really want to take in zero trans fats, you can't eat any animal products. Unsaturated fat, there's polyunsaturated and monounsaturated. Monounsaturated, the poster child's olive oil. Olive oil is not healthy. Now, if you compare olive oil to canola oil, olive oil is probably a little healthier than canola oil. But it's like comparing smoking 3 packs of cigarettes a day to 5 packs of cigarettes a day. I mean, that sounds absurd, doesn't it? That's the argument these people use. That's what saturated fat. One of the many saturated fats is anti-inflammatory. Wow, the stearic acid, it's an anti-inflammatory fat. That's why coconut oil is so good for you. It only makes up about 6% of the total fat in coconut oil. Go smoke 3 packs of cigarettes a day and see what that does for you. Be like taking coconut oil. So about 75% of olive oil is monounsaturated fatty acid, but 14 to 18% of olive oil is saturated fatty acid. What does saturated fatty acids do? It raises your LDL. What does that do? Increases your risk of dying of heart disease. And then there's polyunsaturated fats. That's where we get our omega-3s, omega-6s, omega-7s, omega-9s. So these chains of carbon atoms, there's an alpha and omega. And if the third carbon from the omega carbon has a double bond on it, guess what that's called? It's an omega-3 fatty acid. If it's the 6th carbon from the omega carbon, that's the omega-6 fatty acid. Now, there are 2 of these fatty acids that are essential. It's ALA and LA. ALA is the omega-3 fatty acid that is essential. And under the right conditions, our body can make EPA and DHA, the fish oil omega-3 fatty acids. Fish does not make that oil. It comes from algae, a plant. It's a theme here, in case you hadn't guessed. ALA, alpha-linoleic acid, is the basic omega-3 fatty acid, and under the right circumstances, that can be made into EPA, or eicosapentaenoic acid, and then that can be made into DHA, or docosahexaenoic acid. EPA is more anti-inflammatory than Motrin, Celebrex, but you need about 500 milligrams of this a day to be anti-inflammatory. DHA is required for heart and brain health. It's also required for our nerve health. So LA is the omega-6 fatty acid that's essential, but we don't want much of it because all of the inflammatory molecules in your body start with omega-6 fatty acid. And so that starts the prostaglandin cascade, and then the leukotrienes and all these inflammatory chemicals that we know that are good in acute inflammation, but they're horrible in chronic inflammation. So where do we get our omega-6 fatty acids? Cooking oil. So all cooking oils are really strongly omega-6 fatty acid flavored. Now it's optimal that for every one omega-6 we take in, that we take in 4 omega-3s. The standard American diet is 20-to-1 in the opposite direction. So that's why it feeds inflammation. And all of our chronic diseases are fed through inflammation. Chronic inflammation. And it has to do with how we're putting these foods in our mouth. And the bad ones. So look at the cooking oils. So the yellow is omega-6 and the white is omega-3. The only cooking oil that comes close is flax oil. Well, I want to let you in on a little secret. Flax oil is not a healthy oil. When my triglycerides were over 3,200, I was taking about 4 tablespoons of flaxseed oil a day. Why? I was told that it was healthy. And I believed it. And so there's a concept in orthopedics that we call the bigger hammer theory. If a little hammer works, a bigger hammer's better. If a little bit's good, a whole lot's better, right? So I was taking that to the max with my flaxseed oil, and I was driving my triglycerides through the roof. Flaxseed oil is not a healthy oil. There are no healthy oils. Are there any healthy oils? There are no healthy oils. I'll answer that. There are no healthy oils. So what about sugars? Well, there's saccharides, disaccharides, and polysaccharides. That's really all you really need to know about sugars. You don't want to eat refined carbohydrates. They're not health promoting. Complex carbohydrates are very health promoting. That's really what the foundation of our nutrition should be. Unfortunately, when I was eating meat, I would not eat much in terms of carbohydrates because I wanted the meat. So if I had a steak, I'd eat a 2-pound steak and maybe a bite or two of a baked potato, and that's about it. But the baked potato had to have butter and sour cream and bacon on it before I'd eat it. So we really want to concentrate on the complex carbohydrates. And this slide you probably can't see very well, but it's just an example of whole versus refined carbs. You want to stay away from the refined carbs. But you know, there was a guy by the name of Walter Kepner, Duke University in the 1930s and 40s. He actually lost his medical license because he spanked his patients. I'm not making this up. But he would admit people to the hospital and he put them on a white rice, refined sugar, and fruit diet. And that's all they ate. And he could cure diabetes. What? He could cure diabetes and high blood pressure. Thank you. And so how do you do that? Well, diabetes, blood sugar is a symptom of the problem. It's not the problem. So what is the problem in type 2 diabetes? It's fat inside the cells. You have too much fat inside your cells. It won't allow the insulin into the cell to do its job, which is to usher glucose into the cell. Most of the cells in your body run on glucose. So there are a couple of exceptions. The lining of your intestines, those cells are fed by short-chain fatty acids that are only produced by fiber in your diet. So what about fiber? Well, I listed that under carbohydrates because they're you can consider these to be kind of resistant carbs. There are some resistant carbs, and then there are some undigestible carbs that we can't digest, but guess what? Our friendly bacteria can. And you're between 40 and 100 trillion human cells, but you're between 100 and 400 trillion bacteria. You're actually more bacteria than you are human. I'm serious. And those bacteria, they talk to each other. And in your gut, these bacteria take these undigestible plant foods and they produce short-chain fatty acids that not only feed the lining of our gut, but those short-chain fatty acids now we know, just recently, like maybe 3 months ago, the paper was published, these short-chain fatty acids are actually neurotransmitters, and they tell your gut brain that food is either plentiful or scarce, and no matter how much food you're eating, if you're eating like I used to, where I ate primarily meat, and so my bacteria and my intestines didn't get any plant matter, so they were told my gut brain that food was scarce. And so my gut would hold on to each little droplet. No matter how many calories I was feeding it, my gut thought it was starving. So what does that do? Well, that produces diverticulosis, diverticulitis, and all these other bad things. And yes? Diatomaceous? I assume you're talking about diatomaceous earth. If it's food grade, it's good for you. So actually those are little fossils, but they have calcium in them, and they're not bad for you. And so if no matter how much food you're eating, if you don't have the fiber, then your gut brain thinks that food is scarce and it's going to hold on to everything. And so then that creates all kinds of problems. It increases your risk of colon cancer because food doesn't move very fast. A black South African risk of dying of colon cancer is 100 times less than African Americans. 100 times. But if you take somebody from South Africa and they immigrate to the United States and they start eating our crappy food, within a short period of time, their risk of colon cancer is just like they've lived here their whole life. And why is that? They don't eat much meat. It's a common theme. So dietary fiber, there's actually soluble and insoluble, and that solely does it dissolve in water. And so the soluble, this is kind of a list of some of the different examples, but a lot of plants, a lot of food have both soluble and insoluble. And a lot of times the insoluble is in the peel, like an apple peel. So do you want to peel your apples? No. Kiwi, that fuzzy stuff on the outside of a kiwi, you want to eat it. Really. It's a great source of fiber. So if you don't really like the taste of, it's kind of like eating an insect. I try these things, but put it in a smoothie, the whole thing. When I started reading about, the peel of the kiwi is really healthy, and I can eat it. Do I like it? I wouldn't say that, but I can eat it. Yes? Well, now, there's a difference between a smoothie and a juice. So if you do a smoothie, I actually prefer mine to be a roughie, by the way. So I don't want to beat it to death, because then you do start doing stuff to the fiber. So I want to leave the fiber as whole as I can because it's so health promoting. So my smoothie is actually a roughie, and I actually do chew on it some. But the difference would be is if you would juice a kiwi. That's different than putting the whole thing in a smoothie. Because when you juice it, you separate the juice from any fiber. And it's the fiber that is the magic in fruit. Not to mention the antioxidants, but fiber is so vitally important. So as this slide shows, so the gray is the minimum recommended intake of fiber for men and women. The black is the actual intake of fiber in men and women. So we take in about half of the minimum. It's estimated that our not too distant ancestors would take in at least 100 grams of fiber a day. And we can't even take in 30. So you want all the fiber you can stuff in your gullet. It is magical stuff. And we're actually learning, this stuff is only a few months old. This thing on lack of fiber leads to growth of certain bacteria now, and it's the bacteria that causes obesity. Yes, you heard that right. The bacteria can lead to obesity. If we pre-select the bad bacteria that doesn't make us satiated, then it's going to drive our hunger, and we're never going to be satiated, and we're going to eat. So most I ever weighed is 226 pounds. I'm 5'10". That's obese. I weigh 165. That's what I weighed as a junior in high school. It's proportioned a little bit differently, but still. It's kind of like my hair is a little different too. I used to have actually hair here. So what does this fiber do? Well, it produces through fermentation either some good gases or bad gases. So the good gases are short-chain fatty acids. The bad gases, TMA, trimethylamine, discovered in 2013 at the Cleveland Clinic. What does TMA do? Well, unfortunately, TMA is then oxidized in our liver to TMAO, trimethylamine N oxide. Now, you can go to the lab at most of the hospitals around here and actually have your TMAO level drawn. You can see what it is. Well, I'll let you in on a little clue. If you don't eat meat, you're not going to form any TMAO. And TMAO, again, was just discovered in 2013. So we're still discovering what it actually does. But what it does so far, we've discovered, is really bad things. It's now being implicated in colon cancer and breast cancer. It causes cholesterol accumulation in our arteries. It changes how our bodies respond to cholesterol. And it comes from red meat, dairy, poultry, eggs, fish, and energy drinks. There's no plant listed in that list. It doesn't occur in people that eat plants. And it decreases how cholesterol is removed from our body. Acinetobacter is one of the bacteria in the colon of people that eat meat that ferments these chemicals and produces trimethylamine N oxide. Now, in the name of science, vegans who were vegans for 5 years, vegan in that they did not eat any animal product. Now, I'm not vegan. I have on leather shoes and leather belt. That's why we say whole food plant-based, because vegan is more about what you don't eat. What we promote is what you do eat. Like I used to call this talk, what you don't know about the food you eat will kill you. But fear is only a motivational factor for a short period of time. It's not sustainable. I can't fear you into eating healthy. But I can talk about the health benefits of eating healthy and how you will feel, and that sustains your altered behavior. So vegans who were vegans for 5 years were fed 8 ounces of sirloin and produced 0 TMAO because they didn't have the bacteria. Now, if they were fed another meal of sirloin, that's how quickly the bacteria change in your body, because the bacteria are going to be there depending on what food you're feeding them. So of those 100 to 400 trillion bugs that are inside your body, it really depends on what you're feeding them, whether they're friend or foe. So in this slide, unfortunately, you can't really see, but this is a complex interaction of TMAO and what it does. It leads to ulcerative colitis, which can lead to colon cancer. It also is implicated in colon cancer in itself. It's harmful to the liver. It's really a bad chemical. You don't want it in your body. So that's the carbohydrates. What about protein? The most common question I get when people find out I quit eating meat is, where do you get protein? Well, protein is vital to your body. And actually, the word comes from the Greek word that means of prime importance. That's how exalted we've put this nutrient. Your body has to have protein, but unfortunately, it doesn't need anywhere close to the amount of protein that we're feeding ourselves. So one of the early scientists, Carl Volt, a German scientist, discovered protein. He determined that man needed about 48.5 grams of protein a day. By observing the dock workers in Munich, he calculated that they were consuming about 118 grams of protein a day. So that's how he came up with this number. Had nothing to do with science, in that he just observed these strong, what appeared to be healthy guys, and they were eating about 118 grams of protein a day. So that's what he said we needed. Not based on science, just his observation. Well, his protege, W.O. Atwater, set up the first nutrition lab at USDA. USDA was formed by Abraham Lincoln in 1862. In its documents outlining its purposes, it cannot do anything that harms the cell of any agricultural product, including meat, dairy, eggs. And these guys are in charge of telling us what to eat. It's not a conflict of interest. Not at all. So he recommended 125 grams of protein a day, not based on science, just based on what he felt like we should have. And that became written in stone. Every textbook in nutrition in the United States, up until probably the late 70s, early 80s, had this as a number that was etched in stone. And it was not based on any science. Dr. Campbell started researching protein and what it did in the body, particularly animal protein. Now, when I was in college, I also did organic chemistry research for the EPA. The national head of groundwater research is in Ada, Oklahoma, at the Robert S. Kerr Environmental Research Lab. And in that lab, there was a room that was kept at minus 40 degrees. That was about as big as that area over there. We had every chemical known to mankind in this room. And in this room sat a little vial of this chemical that scared me to death. I hated going into that room. It was a little vial of stuff called aflatoxin. Aflatoxin is a natural plant mold from peanuts and corn. And I was scared to death of it because it was supposed to be the most potent cancer-causing compound ever discovered. Dr. Campbell discovered it. He says it doesn't cause cancer unless it's in the presence of animal protein. And it's actually that the animal protein is the carcinogen and the aflatoxin is just there by happenstance. And he primarily researched casein, which is milk protein. And in my opinion, milk is the worst thing you put in your body. It's perfect growth fluid to take a 40-pound calf and make it a 600-pound heifer in a short period of time. If you compare that dairy, cow's milk, to human milk actually has the lowest protein of any mammalian milk ever studied. The lowest protein. And here we're feeding our babies cow's milk that has some of the highest. So, protein. Skim milk, it's worse because it's higher protein. You take out the fat, the skim milk, it's higher protein. Now, dairy fat is not good for you, but it's not nearly as bad as dairy protein. And so skim milk is actually worse. And if you look on the American Academy of Orthopedic Surgery's website, AAOS, under osteoporosis treatment, one of the suggested things to do to keep your bones strong is to take in low-fat milk. What? That literally causes you to urinate your bones away. I'm not making that up. Because it's so acidic. And your body, you don't absorb much of the calcium in cow's milk anyway. But what you do, then you end up literally urinating that away. Your body balances the acid from calcium and phosphate in your muscles, and then eventually that's balanced by taking calcium out of your skeletal system and replenishing your muscles. That's why as we get older, we're more prone to osteoporosis. We're also a lot more prone to falling because our muscles get weak because we're urinating our bones down the toilet. The non-animal-based milks, for the most part, are healthy. You have to watch out for added sugars. Almond milk, soy milk, rice milk, hemp milk. I mean, there's a bunch of different ones. Cashew milk, oat milk. We do soy milk, and some people are scared of soy. Now, I don't want organic soy because it's going to be GMO. But soy has a bad rap in that people say one of the things that's said against soy is that it has these phytoestrogens that will cause an estrogen-like response in the human body. That is not true. It does have phytoestrogens, but a lot of plants have phytoestrogens. And guys, get used to this. You're not going to grow man boobs by these phytoestrogens. The human body has two different types of estrogen receptors, alpha and beta. In the breast, soy attaches to the beta estrogen receptor. That is an anti-estrogen effect. It's like taking tamoxifen. So if you've had breast cancer, you want to take in all the soy that you can stuff in your mouth because your risk of recurrence is so much lower if you take in a lot of soy because it's blocking the effect of any of the estrogen. Now, in your bones, the beta estrogen receptors build strong bones. So you get a benefit from that. And there are a lot of different, what we call phytoestrogens that attach to estrogen receptors. And very few of them have any pro-estrogen activity. So protein, red meat, increase the risk of all kinds of cancers and heart disease. Chicken, this was in Europe where chickens aren't allowed to be raised the way they are here in the United States. Their chickens are healthier because they're not kept in cages. What does free-range chicken in the United States mean? By legal definition, it means that that chicken has the ability to see sunlight. I'm not making it up. Look it up. So you can keep a chicken in a little bitty cage and open the door at the end of that long chicken coop and legally call that free range here in the United States. In Europe, they can't do that. They don't allow those little cages. But for every 50 grams of chicken consumed, it tripled the risk of lymphoma. Chickens are so full of viruses, and you can kill the virus by cooking the meat, but you can't kill the effect of it. And that is 4 to 6 hours after consuming chicken, your C-reactive protein goes up a lot. And it has to do with the dead viruses and the dead bacteria in that chicken meat. Plus, chicken and fish, when it's cooked, it forms a superestrogen compound. You don't have to worry about the estrogen in soy. This is a real bad estrogen compound. And the only way it's not formed when you cook chicken or fish is if you boil it. But if you cook it, fry it, broil it, charcoal it, any other way, you form this superestrogen compound called PHIP, P-H-I-P. Now that stands for a real long word I can't pronounce. I really bring out my Okie in me when I try to pronounce that word. But it's a superestrogen compound, and it drives the risk of breast, ovarian, uterine, prostate cancers significantly. So if you're going to eat chicken, you probably ought to eat it raw. No way, Jose. Dairy increases the risk for cancer, heart disease, multiple sclerosis. Yes, I said that. Diabetes, autoimmune disease. So if you have any autoimmune disease, you ought to run from dairy. Did you have a question? Oh. Salmon? Part of the problem with salmon is now we have Franken salmon, this GMO salmon that's insane. And a lot of the salmon is not wild caught, even though it says it. And so farm-raised fish is just like any other farm-raised anything. It's not good. If I could get a little bit of wild-caught salmon, it probably would not be too bad. I wouldn't want to cook it very much. And I wouldn't want to eat very much of it. But if I could go to Alaska and pull it out of the water, that's the only way I'd really ensure that it was wild caught. So dairy farmers. My grandfather was a dairy farmer. When I was 4 years old, I stayed with him. And at the age of 4, I was driving a Poppin' John Deere tractor, those Poppin' Johnnies. Those were the tractors with the big wheels on the side and the 2 little wheels in the front. I'd have to stand up to push the clutch in. I don't know what my grandfather was thinking letting me drive this tractor. But I really liked being on the dairy farm with my granddad. They have the highest occupational risk of leukemia. Why? Bovine leukemia virus. Bovine leukemia virus, 79% of regular dairy consumers test positive for this virus. What does this virus do? Well, obviously, it is implicated in human leukemia. It is now implicated in breast and ovarian and colon cancer. It's not something you really want in your body. And animal protein is more closely correlated with your risk of heart disease than any other single nutrient, and you never hear that. Animal protein, heart disease, together. So if you take animal food intake, and all of it, there seems to be a little threshold in terms of, for this is breast cancer. What? Did I just say animal protein caused breast cancer? You mean we don't have to race for the cure? No, we know the cause. It's the food you eat. It's not genetic. Even if you're BRCA1 and BRCA2 positive, breast cancer reduction gene 1, breast cancer reduction gene 2, if you have mutations at those and you're BRCA1 and 2 positive, you don't have to have double mastectomy like Angelina Jolie did. Eat the right food and you won't get cancer. So let's look at animal protein intake. Look, there's no threshold. And there's numerous mechanisms by which animal protein has been shown to cause cancer or significantly increase the risk. And I mean, there are a multitude of pathways that this occurs. One is animal protein increases insulin-like growth factor. The higher your insulin-like growth factor, the higher your risk of cancer. So what about dietary fat? Well, if you look at saturated fat, there's no threshold either. Now, saturated fat probably gets accused because we take in saturated fat when we take in animal protein. And those two are hard to separate. But when you look at the causative mechanisms, animal protein is actually more implicated than animal saturated fat. So what happens with cancer? You have initiation, promotion, and progression. Takes the average cancer in the body to be about as big as the end of my little finger to be detected. It's been in the body 10 years by the time it's detected, on average. It's estimated that, now I just went blank on the Apple, the Apple inventor, the Apple computer, Jobs. It's estimated that his pancreatic cancer actually started when he was about 21, and they based that estimate on cancer doubling rates. As he got older, he actually became plant-based, and that probably allowed him to live a lot longer than what he would have if he'd, but I mean, so what, he died at about the age of 50? So that cancer had been in his body maybe 28, 29 years. The cancer starts to spread at 3 to 5 years. So it's much better to prevent than to treat. And animal protein is the only protein that's been shown to promote cancer growth. Plant protein, even at ultra high doses, doesn't promote cancer growth. And when this slide was made, the statistics were from 1984. My, how times have changed. Unfortunately, women in Japan have a lot higher risk of breast cancer now because we've exported our way of eating to Japan. But in 1984, if that Japanese woman immigrated to the United States and she started eating our crappy food, she'd get breast cancer just like she was born here. It's not genetic, it's the food you eat. It's the food we eat. So don't forget to focus on the food. Cancer death rates are just increasing. These occur due to epigenetic changes through methylation and demethylation. Guess what blocks methylation? Green leafy vegetables. Doesn't take a rocket scientist to figure out if it blocks it, the more green leafies you eat, the less methylation is occurring in your body, less risk of cancer. So I want to eat green leafy vegetables at least 6 times a day. That's my goal. I have it with breakfast. I put it in my Ruffy. I'll have it at lunch, snacks. And when we started eating this way, I didn't even know what kale was. First time I ate kale, I thought, who could eat this? Ugh, it was cardboard. Now I crave it. I'm addicted to kale. Got to be addicted to something, might as well be addicted to something good. So cancers are also methionine dependent. Methionine is an amino acid that's highest in fish, chicken, eggs, red meat, and milk. Vegetables all have low methionine content, so you can actually eat to starve cancer. And cancers can't grow without growing blood vessels. William Li, L.I., most viewed TED Talk of 2011. He's director of the Angiogenesis Institute of America. He also has an organization that's called eattobeat.org, and that's Eat to Beat Cancer. But he studied how blood vessels grow, and he's developed drugs to block blood vessel growth. And one of them has just recently been released to fight breast cancer. He has one that's been on the market now for several years for brain cancer. But these block blood vessel growth. So he really studied blood vessels and how they formed, and he determined that, in health, there's a normal balance between the promoters of blood vessel growth and then inhibitors. In some diseases, there's too little blood vessel. Some diseases, there's too many blood vessels. Some diseases, there's a combination. Alzheimer's. What's the fastest growing disease in the United States? Alzheimer's. 10% of the people who die of Alzheimer's that are autopsied are determined not to have Alzheimer's. They have mad cow disease. And I'm not making this up. 10% of the people in the United States that are autopsied that die of Alzheimer's have mad cow disease. How many cows do we test in the United States for mad cow disease? 0.0000015% of all animals are tested. We don't want to find it. What happens in our hospital if we biopsy somebody that has mad cow disease? Everything in the OR is thrown away. We cannot disinfect it. We know of no substance that can kill the causative agent of mad cow disease, which is a prion. It isn't even like a virus. It's a partial protein that gets into our tissues, gets into our nervous tissue, and becomes part of the DNA and then starts replicating itself. Nothing known to man can kill it. It is some science fiction stuff that is scary. So, cancer becomes dangerous by growing blood vessels. If you block the blood vessel growth, the cancer can stay there your whole life and never cause any problem. So it becomes deadly when it grows a blood vessel, and it's estimated it can't grow bigger than a head of a pin without growing blood vessels. And so Dr. Lee actually started looking at anti-angiogenic therapy as a means to block tumor growth, to kill tumors, as opposed to chemotherapy, which actually attacks all cells in your body. So this is a glioblastoma at week 0 and a glioblastoma at week 4 on his anti-angiogenic therapy. This is breast cancer at week 0 and breast cancer at week 4 on these anti-angiogenic therapies. Then he gets the idea, can we eat to starve cancer? And he starts testing various food substances and foods as to their vessel blocking ability. That's where he came up with this eattobeat.org. So you can go on that website and see what foods block angiogenesis. But most of the ones that we promote block angiogenesis anyway. So I really don't need to go on that website. Cruciferous vegetables are very health promoting. They have this chemical in their cell wall that when it's chopped, crushed, chewed, it starts forming isothiocyanates, a chemical reaction. We've identified 120 different isothiocyanates. They're all synergistic. Cooking stops the conversion. It doesn't kill what's already been converted. So what we like to do is chop up our cruciferous vegetables, put them in the refrigerator, and then we do this, my wife kind of meal preps on Sunday afternoons, and then maybe Wednesday night she may want some broccoli soup or whatever. Well, that's been chopped in our refrigerator, forming these isothiocyanates that whole time. These isothiocyanates are anti-cancer agents, they're anti-inflammatory, they're antioxidants, they boost the immune system, they inhibit angiogenesis. So normally in population studies, an increase of 20% of a vegetable decreases disease rates by 20%, but with cruciferous vegetables, you get a double bang for your buck. So a 20% increase correlates to a 40% decrease. And a lot of it has to do with the isothiocyanates. But there are a lot of other beneficial compounds in these plants. We just can't go grab an isothiocyanate and say, okay, this is the magic agent. No, it's the plant itself. That's the magic agent. 3 servings of cruciferous vegetables decreases prostate cancer risk by 41%. 3 servings a week. 1 serving of cabbage decreased pancreatic cancer rates by 38%. They're also antibacterial and antiviral. Mushrooms, they're anti-inflammatory. They have these immune modulating chemicals that enhance our natural immune system. They're anti-cancer. They have antigen binding lectins. Now there's a goofball going around the United States promoting a book called The Plant Paradox. And he specifically targets lectins as the bad actor in plants. Lectins are very health promoting. No matter what Dr. Gundry says. There is no plant paradox. The paradox is this guy wants you to buy his supplement to block the lectins. Paradox. That's two doctors. No. You're a little slow on that one, Rob. Mushrooms. So mushrooms have an aromatase inhibitor. Aromatase is the enzyme that converts testosterone to estrogen. So in Korea, a woman who ate one white button mushroom, and that's that cheap mushroom in the vegetable aisle of your grocery store, one white button mushroom a day decreased her breast cancer risk by 64%. In China, a woman who ate one white button mushroom a day and drank green tea, 89% reduction premenopausal, 82% postmenopausal. Just based on the aromatase inhibitors and the phytonutrients that are in green tea. So what are the mushrooms that have the high aromatase levels? White button, white stuffing, crimini, portobello, reishi, maitake. Mild is shiitake, chanterelle, and baby button. No aromatase, oyster, and wood ear. Wood ear has a chemical in it that reverses heart disease by itself. Wood ear is the primary mushroom that makes hot and sour soup thick. So, it's health promoting. And they all have angiogenesis inhibitors. So what does this do? It prevents tumors from growing, prevents fat cells from expanding, prevents inflammation, inhibits cancer development. So what promotes angiogenesis? Well, the stuff I like to eat. Stuff I grew up eating. We liked our steak. We liked it chicken fried, which was refined white flour and milk gravy. My mother, whew. It doesn't make a difference. Now, if you eat a lot of mushrooms, you probably want to cook them. There is a chemical in mushrooms that's deactivated by heat that some people can react to. But one raw button mushroom a day, nobody's really going to react to that. So these are our anti-angiogenic foods. Alliums, which are your onions, garlics, they're very health promoting. So basically across the board, if you ate a half cup of chopped onions a day, you'll decrease your cancer risk by a minimum of 50%. And it doesn't matter if they're cooked or raw. Now, if you're the only one eating them, you probably want to cook them. You won't have any friends. Yeah, you can. As a matter of fact, I do. It makes vitamin D. Yeah. Right. Mushrooms, it is true. So what she asked was, if you put a mushroom in sunlight, will it increase its vitamin D level? And yes, it does. And they do make vitamin D. So that is one way to get vitamin D. Now, I'm not a big supplement person, but because I'm inside all the time, and I'm not sunbathing my mushrooms regularly, I take a vitamin D supplement. So pomegranates and berries are very health promoting. Pomegranates have a chemical in them that reverses heart disease as well. So in my roughy, every morning I have some pomegranates, I have some blueberries, I have cranberries. I don't know if you've ever eaten a cranberry, but I don't know who decided to eat the first cranberry, but the person was seriously insane. But I block the taste of it with the other stuff I put in my roughie. Dried fruits are okay, except they increases the sugar content, so I wouldn't consume a lot of them. So pomegranates and berries inhibit breast cancer, prostate cancer, colon cancer, leukemia. They have angiotensin converting enzyme inhibitors, so they're antihypertensives. Seeds and nuts, there's hundreds of studies that show that these are very beneficial to you. Sesame seeds have these dietary lignans, which are phytoestrogens, guys, that are very health promoting. Sesame seed actually is the highest calcium food there is. Sunflower seeds, pumpkin seeds. I eat pumpkin seeds when I have salads for lunch. I'll eat some pumpkin seeds on my salad. And sesame seeds also have the full spectrum of vitamin E, which you want. So our superfoods, we classified them into Jiji bombs, greens, grains, beans, onions, mushrooms, berries, seeds, and nuts. Now, this is what I want to eat every day, and basically in this order, in terms of amount, not in terms of calories. So a pound of greens averages about 100 calories. So you can't get your calories from your greens. You got to get your calories from your grains and beans. So if you try to get all your calories from greens, you're going to be really hungry. Ginger root is very healthy. So that I have ginger root and turmeric root in my roughy every day as well. Now with turmeric, you want to mix it with black pepper because it increases absorption 1,000%. It's something they must have known when they were developing the curries in India because they always have a lot of turmeric and black pepper in them. Black pepper increases the absorption of turmeric 1,000%. Now, I don't know exactly how much black pepper is required. I like my black pepper fresh anyway, so I just grind it into my roughy. Some days I get a little too much and it's a lot hotter. Well, you want to do it, you actually want to consume your roughy or smoothie slowly, and then you'll absorb it. Now, of course, I don't do that because I'm usually in a hurry and I just, but I'm getting enough nutrition. It don't look like I'm wasting away too badly. Although if you look at an old picture and a current picture, there's a lot of difference. Well, that goes back to the protein. I don't think even high-performance athletes do not need to supplement protein. And there are various examples of that. Guys that really do a lot of weightlifting, they're kind of, they're in this culture where they think they have to have the protein. I want whole food, unprocessed roughy. I don't want something to come out of a can, mix it with water, and then me drink it. That's processed food. That's not what we're really talking about. Now, pea protein is, if for whatever reason you got to have some protein, I would highly discourage that. So the question is about raw versus cooked. I don't think it matters. We don't attempt to balance that out. Now, we eat a variety of raw and a variety of cooked, but we don't make a conscious decision, okay, I've got to have this raw and I've got to have that cooked. We just eat. Don't count calories. I don't count anything. That's too, I've got enough stuff to worry about. I don't need to add that. Yes. How do we what? How do we prepare? That may be a question you need to ask my wife since she's the food preparer. But I mean, I don't think there's a lot of thought that goes into, we don't want to have big cells of food. So are you talking about food clumping together?
Yeah, you prepare food so that you reduce the amount of cells inside.
I'm not real sure I know what you're talking about, but we don't do anything special with our food.
You have stayed with your wife for a long time. I thought you must know how to prepare some foods so that there don't appear big cells inside.
I'm still, are you,
Preparation of food using heat.
and that forms big cells? The heat does? Is that what you're asking?
You make it palatable. You make it just swallow by cooking. Now, how do you cook some of the food so that they're easy to swallow?
By sauteing or steaming, and do that with no added oil. And my
Each family has got a type of oil they use.
type of oil,
From generation to generation. You must have, it's necessary to have some oil.
it's necessary to have fat.
We don't deep fry, but you must have some sort of soil to prepare the food.
Well, yeah, I mean, we cook with no added oil, and that is the healthiest way to cook. And
That is passed on from your generation to another generation.
no, that's not, because my mother cooked with lots of oil. But it almost killed me. Yes.
Okay, if today I decide that I'm going to go plant-based, are there still some plant foods that I should avoid?
Well, that's more in the question is if you go plant-based, are there some foods you should avoid? And that's really individualized. So I can't make a generalized statement because we all have different food sensitivities. And so you just got to basically kind of trial and error. We know the foods that are not reactive to most humans. But there are some foods that some people react to and others don't. And so that's just kind of, you got to experiment to find that. Yes? Well, it is an animal product, and that's why vegans don't consume it. I don't consume a lot of added sweetener, primarily because I was a sugar addict, and I want to stay away from that. But if you want to add, if a person wants to add a little honey to something to sweeten it, I think that's okay. In terms of the sweeteners, probably date sugar is the best, and that is a whole food. It's dried dates that then is made into sugar form, but it has the fiber in it, and so it's probably the healthiest sweetener. But by and large, I don't recommend sweetening foods except for an occasional dessert that we do at either a birthday or a holiday. But we don't eat that stuff on a regular basis. I think it's primarily carbohydrate. Well, I think that's probably the best use for coconut oil. No, not by putting it on his skin. You're not going to absorb enough of the fatty acids to really make a difference. Yeah, Yeah, it's definitely better than petroleum jelly. But that's the only way that I would recommend using coconut oil. And I actually do that. My wife makes maybe she's trying to kill me. Well, I'd much rather have oregano than oregano oil or sage oil. I'd rather have sage. Sage is a very healthy herb. Oregano is an extremely healthy herb, but if I have the oil, it's going to go on my skin. It's not going to go in my mouth. Same thing with sage oil. If I want it, I'll put it on my skin. It's not going to go in my mouth. There are no healthy oils. I think I said that a time or two. Stevia is a plant that is extremely sweet, and stevia, the stuff that you buy, is highly processed, and I do not recommend it. So we're naturally attracted to sweet things. It's the way we were made. That's because fruit is very healthy. But when you process it and you get fructose or stevia processed, it's highly concentrated and it keeps you addicted to sweetness. So much so that if you're drinking stevia in tea and you go and drink some water, it's not going to taste sweet. This tastes sweet to me. You're talking 15 years ago, I was drinking a 6-pack of Code Red a day. I couldn't taste sweet if I had to because I kept poisoning my tongue all the time. Well, oil, sesame oil might be a little different, but most of the oils actually cover up taste. Toasted sesames have the same flavor as toasted sesame oil, but the toasted sesame seed is the whole food, and it's much healthier. But she can flavor anything without adding any oil to anything. Even fried okra. We do an oven fried okra that has no oil added to it, and it's 100 times better than fried okra because it doesn't coat your mouth with that oily taste. And once you get away from oil, then, because it's hard to eat out and not get added oil, but once you get away from oil, you'll realize how much it coats and how much it distorts your taste. Well, we add a lot of spices, and we add probably 10 times more spices now than we did before because we're flavoring the food. And, my wife cooks beans a lot because she's the bean queen. And we used to flavor the beans with ham hock. So is there something you can do to get that flavor and not have the bad part of the ham hock? Yeah, it's smoked paprika. And it makes those beans so unctuous, and umami is another taste by doing these healthy substitutions. That's where, and there is a ton of stuff on the internet about, and there are even plant-based cooking schools on the internet that will teach you how to do jambalaya and There are schools on the internet that can teach you how to cook without adding oil. And especially, is it Dell? The guy that actually taught us about getting the pan really hot to saute. Can you? Well, he has a video about how to do it. What's his name? It's Dell. So it's Dell S-O-F-F-R-E, I think. S-O-U-F-F-R-E. But he actually has a demonstration on the internet about how to saute without adding oil to the pan. And he uses cast iron and gets it really, really hot, and then throws the vegetables in there and then deglaze with some water. But she can answer those here in a little bit. If these questions about actually how to provide. Yeah, that's what I ate all that. Mm-hmm. Well, what I'm talking about is what is healthiest for all humans. But that's not healthy. So what's your... Right. I was a non-vegetarian. But it's not healthy. And don't care what you're raised as. If you're human, eating animal flesh is not healthy, period. Not before I ate 53 years of my life the way you're describing. That is not health promoting. Well, by definition, a vegetarian is, there are different categories of vegetarians. There's lacto-ovo vegetarians, and those people eat eggs and drink milk, and they're not any healthier than people that eat meat because eggs and milk are not health promoting. And then there's pesco-vegetarians. Those are people that eat primarily vegetables and also eat fish. They're not as healthy as whole food plant-based. And no matter what your heritage is or how you grew up, I grew up eating fried animal flesh at every meal. That's not healthy. There's no science on the face of this earth that has ever been truthfully done that would suggest that eating animal flesh is healthy for anybody, any human. The healthiest ways for humans to eat is what I'm describing. And I also want to call your attention to the third leading cause of death in the United States is healthcare. I'm serious. And that's a low estimate. Some estimate 440,000 people a year are killed. Now, 104,000 of these are people that are given the right drug for the right reason, in the right way. They have an adverse drug reaction and die. No mistake made in any way. And these people are given a drug and they have an adverse drug reaction and die. So if you want to stay alive, stay out of the hospital. It depends. I'd have to know a lot more particulars about his case. But in general, this is very health promoting for your liver. So in terms of healing, there's what's been described as the fast way, the faster way, and the fastest way. The fastest way for us to actually heal is to quit eating. And I'm serious. It turns your body in from trying to digest food into actually regenerating. And yeah, there are instances where the liver has almost completely regenerated in water-only fasting. Now that should be only supervised by a physician who is trained in water-only fasting. And there are only a few of those places around the country. There's one at True North in Santa Rosa, California, and they keep people on a water-only fast up to 6 weeks. And they will cure cancer, they will cure diabetes, they'll cure high blood pressure in a matter of days. They get diabetics off their medicine usually on day 2. True North, water-only fasting. Fasting, F-A-S-T-I-N-G. It's what we used to do for religious purposes. Well, in terms of health, there's no question that whole food plant-based is the healthiest way for 100% of humans to eat. You don't have to eat right for your blood type and all that jazz. You don't have grain brain or wheat belly. For most of us, wheat is very health promoting. Well, our body has a way to protect that, and that's through the production of ketones. And so if you're fasting after day 2, your body starts producing ketones and the tissues start burning the ketones, and they don't utilize muscle for fuel. They utilize fat. That's why the average human can go 60 days with no food. Well, it's difficult to be gluten-free. Gluten's in all kinds of stuff. My daughter is gluten sensitive. She's also plant-based. So there's gluten allergy, and that's called celiac. There's gluten sensitivity, and there's only about 2% of the population that's truly either celiac or gluten sensitive. Some of the gluten reactions are actually reactions to the glycophosphates that are put on the wheat to dry the wheat out so it all dries out evenly. So right before harvest, a common practice in the United States is for the farmers to spray their field with Roundup, not to kill the weeds, but to make the wheat ripen all at the same stage. And then a lot of residue of the glycophosphate on that wheat. So I prefer organic for that reason. And so the things I'm going to eat everything of, I prefer organic. If I'm going to peel it, I don't think it matters that much. And if you think you're gluten sensitive or gluten allergic, there are tests that can be done to determine that. Or you can go on what's called an elimination diet. And basically that eliminates most foods that anybody's ever shown a reaction to. And then you slowly introduce different foods back in. Pomelo. Well, we've done modifications of plants for hundreds of years. What GMO really is where we take the genes of a bacteria and we splice it into a plant to make it resistant to an herbicide. That's where, now in terms of like the grapefruit, that's a hybrid. And we've been hybridizing stuff for centuries, since I can't remember the name of the monk that started doing the genetic experiments, but we've been hybridizing stuff, and a grapefruit is a hybridized fruit. Correct. And so we've been doing that for a long time. But that's different than what we're talking about with the GMO stuff in terms of truly genetically modifying the organism and taking genes from something totally unrelated and splicing it into a different organism to make it resistant to something. Somebody else had their hand up. Some have claimed that it can improve your eyesight. As far as like cataracts, that has been shown to occur sometimes by reversing cataracts by going on to a high antioxidant plant-based diet. But I've been plant-based for 9 years. Now, I'm not totally blind, but I can't see you very well without these glasses, and that's not getting better. Coffee? It's good. It's the stuff you add to the coffee that's bad. Well, as long as you're not addicted to caffeine, caffeine's not really a problem. There's some benefits to caffeine. It probably helps in terms of, it may actually prevent Alzheimer's, help prevent Alzheimer's. Alzheimer's is highly related to saturated fat. Yeah, there are some genetic things that predispose you, but primarily it's the food you eat. There's not any proof that caffeine actually causes heart disease. Now, if you're drinking a whole lot of caffeine and you have heart disease already, it can cause your heart to beat funny and go into what's called AFib. It can contribute. But I drink caffeine. I don't drink a lot of it. But I have green tea, and I'm not hypertensive any longer. I quit eating the stuff that causes the high blood pressure. Well, if you're eating a whole food plant-based diet and you drink caffeine, it's not going to cause any trouble. It's all the other stuff. Now, yeah, we may want to focus on the caffeine and say, oh, that's bad. But it's all the other stuff you're eating that's actually really bad. But if you're eating whole food plant-based, I don't think you have to worry about caffeine. One, you're not going to be you're not going to have high blood pressure. Two, you're not going to have heart disease. Did you say no prostate? Not that I'm aware of. So it's the casein in dairy that seems to be the bad actor, along with all the other growth promoters. It affects the way our bodies react to a lot of stuff, and it's associated with diabetes, both type 1 and type 2, cancer, osteoporosis, multiple sclerosis, heart disease, and autoimmune disease. Type 1 diabetes is an autoimmune disease that occurs due to a reaction to the broken down products of casein. And so the child's intestines are not fully formed until they're about 6 years of age. And you take somebody off of breast milk and put them on cow's milk, that cow's milk in the stomach is partially digested and it goes into the small intestines and it's absorbed right into the bloodstream. And so that's a foreign protein into the bloodstream of a young child. Its immune system sees that foreign protein and comes in and attacks it. And some of these particles that are cleaved off of the casein actually look like the cells that make insulin in the pancreas. So then the immune system starts attacking the pancreas. And by the age of 6 and 7, you see a huge uptick in type 1 diabetes, which can be prevented if they don't drink cow's milk. The other thing about osteoporosis is it's not the calcium. Who takes calcium supplements? All that's been shown to do is increase your risk of having a heart attack. Why is that? Because it causes transient hypercalcemia when you take that supplement, and it does nothing but harm to your body. It's the acidic foods that you eat that then essentially melt your skeleton, because your body's going to balance that acid. And some of those acids are sulfuric acid, and that is a very powerful acid. And so there are a bunch of ways that they've determined that it's not a lack of calcium, it's too much acid that causes it. In the United States, we average about 1,000 milligrams of calcium a day of intake. We have about 100 hip fractures per 100,000 people. In Hong Kong, half of our calcium, a third of our hip fracture rate. It's not a calcium problem. It's an acidic food environment. Obesity, we're just marching ourselves down. These slides are actually downloaded directly from the CDC. Now, they're a little busy, but in 1990, we had 10 states had a prevalence of obesity less than 10%, but no state was greater than 15%. In 2000, no state had a prevalence of obesity less than 10%. 23 were between 20 and 24%. None were greater than 25%. 10 years later, 2010, 36 states had a prevalence of obesity equal to or greater than 25%. 12 of us, who I call the Big 12, were greater than 30%. Now, the pseudoscience and the fake news people would have you believe that the reason we're getting fat is because we were told to eat low fat, and that's what's driving our obesity. It's the fact that we were told to eat low fat. And the truth is, in 2010, we're eating about 400 more calories per day than we ate in 1970. And those extra calories are coming from added fat and added refined flour. And it's not the low-fat diet that's causing us to be fat, because we never went on one. We're eating more calories, we're eating more fat. Like, what do you mean by food supplement? You mean to add to food? I don't think it's required if you're eating whole food. So what we've done with enhanced flour or enriched is we take out all the nutrients and then we add a few back. It's not healthy. Right, of course, it's got to be artificial. So the question is about pesticides in the vegetables. Do we see a long-term effect? It depends on what you compare that with. So if you're comparing eating vegetables that have pesticide with eating animal flesh, you're much better off eating the pesticide vegetables than you are animal flesh. Not solely just because of the animal flesh, but every chemical that animal has come in contact with is stored in its fat. So you get a lot more pesticide contact by eating animal flesh than you do with plants. So I didn't say that just solely because I'm all about plants. There's a lot of reasons for that. But if you compare eating organic versus conventional, I'd probably prefer the organic. So This is, now my pointer's only working ever so often. So the top left one is 1990, 2000, 2010. We're becoming obese because we're eating more calories, plain and simple. And what are the foods that are really fattening? What I really like to eat. I didn't quit eating a T-bone because it didn't taste good. I quit eating a T-bone because it tried to kill me. And it does it through this food addiction. And biological systems are driven to seek pleasure, avoid pain, conserve energy. That's what drives us. And it's further motivated by moods of happiness or unhappiness. In 2014, the World Health Organization said depression was the #1 health concern worldwide. Why is everybody depressed? Because we're feeding them our food. We don't have to worry about our national debt to China because we're going to kill them with our diet. The Chinese government has actually come out and said by the year, I think 2025, they want to cut their animal consumption in half because they realize that this Western diet's now become a status symbol in China to eat meat. And they have blossomed with diseases like their bodies are blossoming like they live here in the United States. So processed foods hijacks our motivational triad because it is an addiction. And your brain on refined sugar on a functional MRI scan looks just like your brain on cocaine. Your brain on fat on a functional MRI scan looks just like your brain on morphine. Same neurotransmitters are involved. I'm sorry? I don't know what a balanced meal is. It's a what? If it contains animal flesh, yes. Moderation kills, especially when it's animal protein. And I mean, the science is very strongly behind that. There's no getting around it. And you're motivated by it due to how you react to salt, sugar, and fat. That's what addicts us. And it occurs through the neurotransmitter dopamine. No. If you eat meat, it's going to kill you. Moderation or no moderation. That's the science. That's you wanting an okay for your bad habits, as far as I'm concerned. I'm serious. That's what we want. We want to be told that what we eat is okay. That's where you get these guys that are selling these books, like the Atkins diet. That's the ketogenic diet. Those diets are they're worse for you than the standard American diet by a long shot. Yes. You are correct. No, they have fat. There's a big difference. It's not oil. So we're not advocating no fat. We want whole food fat. So I don't want processed fat. So the seeds and the nuts. So the guy that really kind of conveys this is Dr. Esselstyn, who wrote the book Prevent and Reverse Heart Disease. In his recommendations, there are no seeds or nuts allowed. because they're high-fat foods. But when he started his studies, that was before there were any studies that said eating seeds and nuts were healthy. And he also didn't know the mechanisms behind how that was. We're born with less dopamine activity. So we have lower dopamine receptors. So we need bigger stimuli, unfortunately. And so that prods us to overeat. It also makes us more prone to substance addiction as well as gambling addiction. And there's between 10 and 40% of us in the United States that are dopamine deficient receptor, dopamine receptor deficient. And I haven't been genetically tested, but because I needed continued stimulation of this highly fattening food, I'm probably one of those dopamine deficient people. I never liked gambling because I hated to lose. So it's all about dopamine. Now, we also know that it's also about our microbiome, that now you can catch obesity like you catch a cold, but you can also catch leanness like you catch a cold. So if you want to be around healthy people, if you want to be healthy, be around healthy people. And I'm not saying that just because of social interaction, it's the microbiological interaction. We all share bacteria. You want to share the healthy bacteria and not the unhealthy. Type 1 diabetes, your body doesn't produce enough insulin. Type 2 diabetes, it is a fat storage problem and can be reversed by eating food without added fat, specifically added oil. Now, if you do eat some seeds and nuts, you want to eat a serving is just what fits in the very small palm of my hand. It's not very many. If you're trying to lose weight, you don't want to eat a lot of high-calorie food. You want to eat nutrient-dense, caloric-poor food. It'll fill your stomach up. It'll fire your stretch receptors. It'll tell your brain you're full. Now, you may not stay satiated for a long period of time, but just eat more high-nutrient food. And you don't have to eat just 3 times a day. You can eat however many you feel like it. So the question, are there any bad plant-based foods? Peanuts are not bad. Corn is not bad, except because most of the corn is GMO. So the studies, I don't know if you know this, but Monsanto is in charge of the science that says their product is not harmful. And they submit that to the USDA and the FDA to get approval. The USDA and the FDA does not do the science, Monsanto does. The studies in lab animals was done for 3 months. The life cycle of a lab rat is 2 years. So in Europe, a couple of years ago, they took the rats out, feeding them GMO products. They didn't see any problems until they were about 9 months out. Then they started seeing a huge uptick in tumors and cancer. And so, I'm not a big fan of GMO. Not the hybridization, but the true GMO is frankenfood. And we're going to pay a price for it. So this is an example of caloric density. You want 400 calories of vegetables would stretch your stomach to the point where your stomach would say, please don't eat any more. But 400 calories of oil is nothing. That slide is probably hard for you to see, but basically this compares nutrients of plant-based versus animal-based foods. The protein in plant-based, about 33 grams per 500 calories, and animals, 34 grams. You don't have to worry about protein. You don't need to add protein supplements. If you just eat a variety of food, you'll get all the protein your body needs, period. Nutrients from animal-based foods increase your risk of cancer. Nutrients from plant-based foods decreases it. Plain and simple. This is the most telling slide in this study. These are World Health Organization statistics. This is percentage of death from heart attack and cancer plotted against percentage of unrefined plant food. This slide does not take a rocket scientist to figure this out. This is not just in the United States, this is worldwide. Humans do best on unrefined plant food, period. Humans do best on unrefined plant food, period. It does not matter where you come from. We're all human. We're all the same. So, in the United States, this said 12% of our calories came from unrefined plant food. That's a lie. 6% of this were French fries and potato chips. I don't consider that unrefined. But, I mean, I'm not making that slide up. There's no way. That came directly from the World Health Organization. Look it up. If that doesn't tell you something, then I think I'm talking to a rock. So, atherosclerosis starts in adolescence. By the age of 15, 100% of Americans already have heart disease. Numerous studies. So, it happens by this modified cholesterol, which is oxidized LDL, creates a reaction where our immune system comes in and starts forming what are called foam cells, and that starts the plaque buildup. By the age of 15, 100% of adolescents who died from traumatic causes and were autopsied already had this in their arteries. That's where we get that information. There are about 3,000 heart attacks per day in the United States. 50% of heart disease is still diagnosed at the time of sudden death, which I still say is too late. Most of us die of some malfunction of the heart. A woman's risk of dying of heart disease is 8 times her risk of dying of breast cancer. But all you hear about is breast cancer, breast cancer, breast cancer. It's not even the #1 cancer killer of women. Lung cancer is still the #1 killer of women from cancer. Men are 19 times more likely to die of heart disease in the United States versus rural China. You take that person from rural China and immigrate them here to the United States, and I don't care what their genetics is. I don't care what their family history is. They're going to die of heart disease if they start eating our food. It's not genetics. Cabbage was invented at the Cleveland Clinic. It does not prolong the life of patients. It does not prevent heart attacks and does not address the cause of heart disease. Angioplasty, the only time angioplasty has been shown to be beneficial is while you're having a heart attack. It's estimated that 85% of all cardiac procedures done here in the United States are unnecessary. And I had an experience with this. I played college football. I've had 11 knee surgeries, 10 on my right knee. I needed a knee replacement when I was 30. When I turned 55, I decided, it's time to have my knee replacement. I called my cardiologist, who I hadn't really talked to in a couple of years. I said, I'm going to have a knee replacement. I need to be cleared for surgery. And he said, the only way I'm going to clear you is if we do another arteriogram. If I see anything, I'm going to stent it. He knew my cholesterol numbers. He knew my blood pressure. He knew all this stuff. I'd given it to him. And I'm not making this up. The next day, I'm at lunch. I kind of tentatively set this up for later that week. Next day, I'm at lunch, and my phone made a sound. I pull it out of my pocket, and I had a message from Forks Over Knives on Facebook. And it said, new meta-analysis reveals stenting asymptomatic heart disease just increases your risk of having a heart attack. So I look at this message, and I call my wife and said, I think I just got a message from God. I'm serious, and this is no joke. And so I said, I really don't want to have this arteriogram now. And she called Dr. Esselstyn, who wrote the book, Prevent and Reverse Heart Disease. He didn't know me from Adam or Eve. And he returned her phone call to me. We spent about 45 minutes on the phone. He convinced me not to have a repeat arteriogram and said, just call your anesthesiologist and tell him you're not going to have cardiac clearance and sign a release. And that's what I did. And so 2 months after I had my knee replacement, I went to Cleveland to meet him. I felt like I at least owed him that much. Unbelievable guy. He was a general surgeon at the Cleveland Clinic in charge of their in charge of their breast and thyroid division. He was researching breast cancer and thyroid cancer and made a startling discovery in the early 80s that the places in the world that didn't have breast cancer, didn't have thyroid cancer, also didn't have heart disease. And these places had something in common. It wasn't that they ate the same food, it's that they didn't eat much animal food. So he became convinced that he could reverse heart disease when it was a total foreign concept to most people. First time I heard it, I thought, I don't believe that's true. You can reverse heart disease? Truth is, you can. And it does it by eating a relatively low-fat and low-protein diet. And it will reverse heart disease. And it does it by the antioxidants in this very powerful food that we eat. And that reverses heart disease. This is an arteriogram of a general surgeon at the Cleveland Clinic. This guy was 45 years old. He had a blood cholesterol level of 154 and had this pretty major heart attack. That's his left anterior descending. It's distal. It's too far down the artery to bypass or stent. So this 45-year-old general surgeon was told there's nothing we can do for you at one of the world's top places that treat heart disease. He just so happened to be in the location where Dr. Esselstyn was. So he goes over and sees Essie, and Essie convinces him to go on his diet, and 2.5 years later, that's his repeat arteriogram. Not only is that 100% reversed, but look at all the other vessels that have formed. That's angiogenesis in a good way, not a bad way. Dr. Williams, who when this slide was made, was 2 years old, so now he's past president of the American College of Cardiology. He says either your cardiologist is a vegan or he hasn't read the data. Plain and simple. He also says, wouldn't it be a laudable goal of the American College of Cardiology to put ourselves out of business? So, healthy lifestyle is very important. There's actually a new board certification on lifestyle medicine, and its primary function is to treat the cause, not to treat the symptom. Nutrition represents a combined activity of countless food substances, vitamin supplements. You're not going to get anything. Now, if you really eat whole food plant-based, you probably ought to take a B12 supplement. Now, animals don't produce B12, but they eat the grass that has the bacteria from the dirt. It's the bacteria from the dirt that actually produces B12. Or you can sunbathe your mushrooms. I mean, that really does work. Or if you don't like doing either one of those, just eat some dirt. To me, I prefer taking a little supplement of B12. B12 deficiency causes irreversible nerve damage. So it is not anything to really laugh about, but you don't need very much of it. There are no nutrients in animal-based foods that are not better provided by plants for all humans, 100% of us. I have not. But there are some that say the bacteria in our intestines, if we're eating strictly plant-based, will provide us B12. And if you do a B12 supplement, it probably should be methylcobalamin, not cyanocobalamin, because some of us cannot methylate the B12 to make it the active form. But, I mean, I love parsley, so maybe I'll just... Well, I don't know that being B12 deficient causes you to not have energy, but it can cause irreversible nerve damage. But going plant-based, you have a lot more energy. And one of the reasons cheese is so hard to give up is it's in all milk, mammalian milk. It's a chemical called casomorphine. It attaches to morphine receptors and it causes the release of dopamine. It takes 10 pounds of milk to make 1 pound of cheese. So this casomorphine is concentrated in cheese. I can't tell you how many people I've met that said, well, I can give up meat, but I can't give up cheese. And it's because of the casomorphine. And that will make you feel really sluggish. Wow. Yeah, that's incredible. Well, those are just healthy lifestyle, what's been shown to be healthy. No, I don't recommend you start drinking if you don't drink. But that's healthy lifestyles. Now, most of this information came from what's called the blue zones. Wine drinking, people, when they had looked at, it's kind of a balance between, so any alcohol increases your risk of cancer. All alcohol increases your risk of cancer. Red wine has been associated with some heart health increase. And, well, more so than just the grapes. Resveratrol is one of the nutrients that's in grapes and wine, but when we really look at the science, resveratrol is not what does it. And in the areas of the world where people drink a little bit of wine, they seem to live longer than abstainers. But I don't recommend anybody that doesn't drink to start drinking for health reasons. That's ridiculous. Yeah, yeah. Kombucha is a fermented product. The problem is really high in sugar. If I did kombucha, I'd do my own. I'm sorry? Tempeh is fermented soybeans. That's not bad. Do we eat it? Yeah, but I don't eat it all the time. Well, it's actually, your body has cannabinoid receptors in most of the tissue in your body. Now, is CBD oil healthy or not? I don't know that answer. I don't know that it's known just yet. There's a lot of research to be done on it. I think it's very promising. Most of the research in marijuana and CBD has been done in Israel. The problem with research here in the United States, it's been illegal until recently to grow hemp. And the only marijuana that can be legally studied in the United States is from Mississippi State University, a strain that has been around for decades. And the marijuana like that's being grown in Colorado, that's being processed and then shipped here to Oklahoma, and companies are legally making CBD without any THC, it's a different plant than the one that's in Mississippi. And so I think the research needs to be done on what's being used. I think it's very promising that CBD is healthy. Now, THC, that's obviously not going to be healthy. But there seems to be something with the CBD that it may be health promoting. And so I think there's some topical CBD stuff that I was given a sample of last week, and I was amazed at what it actually did. But I think the science is still out there.
Does one diet cause you to fart more than another?
For me personally, yes. You know, the complex carbohydrates, it's something that you have to kind of, if you start eating a great big bowl of beans right off the bat, you're probably going to have some gastric distress due to the gas production. Most of our gas production is from swallowed air, not from the food. So what does that say is you actually really need to chew your food a lot, and you're going to have to swallow a lot less air and have a lot less problems. And if you're really bothered by it, get some Beano. Or if your partner's bothered by it. Congratulations, so did I. A couple of months. And is it gonna, I mean, it should go on a downward trend pretty quickly. Yes, ma'am. So this slide, genes don't determine your outcome. It may load the gun, but diet and lifestyle pull the trigger. I'm genetically predisposed to having very high triglycerides. But you don't get over 3,200 without being that. You don't get to a point where your cardiologist says, I've never seen them that high. And now they're under 100 on no medicine, except food is my medicine. Yes? There may be some correlation there. Calcium is not going to cause him to grow. Calcium will not cause him to grow. If he's eating a healthy diet, he doesn't need extra calcium. You know, the green leafy vegetables have all the calcium. Spinach and one of the other greens has calcium oxalate, which is a little harder to absorb. But all the other greens, you're going to absorb a lot more calcium from them. That can be, I mean, if you had your thyroid removed, you're going to have to take thyroid medicine. Are all your parathyroids gone? Usually they try to leave a little bit of one. You probably still have enough to do okay. So, and nutrition can counteract all the bad chemicals that we come in contact with. You don't have to eat a diet to reverse cancer and a different diet to reverse heart disease. It's all the same, whole food, plant-based. And it's beneficial across the board. Now, this could be a whole separate topic. It's estimated it takes 8,000 gallons of water to produce 1 pound of beef. If the whole world ate beef the way we did, it would take 3 worlds to produce that much beef. The aquifer that we're drawing our water from here in Oklahoma and all of central northern America is being discharged at twice its recharge rate. It is not sustainable. We're going to run out of water. Not to mention the fact that in Iowa, there's more pig manure produced than all the human waste in France, England, and Canada combined, just in this one state. We don't have room for all that. And then you add North Carolina onto that, and we've got mountains of pig manure. That's killing our environment, and it's killing our planet. It's killing our island home. It's the only earth we got, and we're killing it. So if you want any of these side effects, you might, yeah. That's it.
Before we move into some Q&A, I want to make 2 announcements. The first one, whose keys are these? Okay. I like the SWAU on there. I'm an alumni as well. The second announcement is that some of our lovely church members have decided to give you guys a little bit of a treat, and they made some vegan cookies. And so if you would like to try them, they're going to be on a table out back. So if you're going to dip out before the Q&A session, please stop by and grab some cookies. Or if you want to go grab some right now, you can feel free to do that. I believe, is your wife still doing a Q&A? Or?
Yeah, I know. She said we went way over time. But you
But
guys
yes,
seem to have a lot of questions.
Thank you guys for coming, and thank you all for coming and attending this. And please don't make our members leave with all the cookies they brought. Just grab a few as you go. Do you want to use that or?
Yeah, just use this. So you're free to leave, or we can stick around for another few minutes and answer questions, whatever you would like.
A question back there.
Who? Oh, yes.
So repeat.
He asked, how do you suggest to get children to eat more vegetables? Well, certainly you're not going to change them overnight. And if they're used to, eating the standard American diet, that's going to be tough. When I'm working with people, it just really depends on the age of the child, for one thing, because, the younger they are, the easier it is to start incorporating more things into their diet. Things like smoothies can be a good way to start because you're getting lots of greens and fruits and stuff in there, and they like that because they're sweet. But just certainly trying to encourage them to try new things. I wouldn't, just do it all at once with them. But the biggest thing I find with kids is just at home, especially, just not having all the processed junk foods around for them to have, just having fresh fruits and things like that, peanut butter and things to snack on, and not, cookies and chips and pop and that kind of thing. Yes. She asked about what our monthly meetings are. So we hold a monthly seminar, which is basically what we just did here today at Community Hospital. So if you're interested in attending again or want to bring friends or family to one, you can go to our website, which is plantbasedokc.com, and we list all of our wellness events on there. And so we will have dates for all of our seminars. They are free of charge. The one we do at our hospital once a month, I do cook a plant-based lunch for everyone, so you're eating while you're listening. Again, they're free, but you do have to make a reservation, and you can get the link to a reservation on our website. The one next weekend is full, but the one in May still has openings, so if you're interested. Then the other thing we do is once a month. It's the first Monday of every month. We are at Rococo Restaurant in North Park Mall. It doesn't cost to actually just come and listen, but Rococo does provide a plant-based menu. So if you order dinner from Rococo, you do have to pay them for your meal. But that is really more of, like what you said, a support group. That is where we're just there to answer questions like we're doing now. Some people have been to a seminar and are starting to eat this way and have more questions, so they want to come and be around other people that are doing the same thing. Some people have never been to anything we've done and they're brand new, so we kind of run the gamut of talking about everything in general at those. So you have to call Rococo. Those are first Monday of every month at 6:00 at Rococo, and you have to call them for a reservation for that because the room size is limited there as well. And those are really the only general seminars we hold monthly. Yes. She asked if I have recipes on the website. I'm working on getting that on the website. What I do post all my cooking and recipes is on Facebook and on Instagram. So Facebook and both are just plant-based OKC. So if you just go to Facebook and type that in, you'll find my page, and I try to post a lot of what I'm cooking on there as well as Instagram. And be sure on Facebook, when you do like our page, to go on there and tell it to notify you whenever something is posted, because Facebook is bad about you not seeing that in your feed a lot, and I'm running into that because they want me to pay to post the boosts and, to boost your post so more people see it. And so just if you click on the get notifications, then you'll know if I've posted something. Oh, she asked about my okra. It's super easy. All I do to do oven-baked okra is I start with frozen okra because when you thaw it, it's very wet and has that good gelatinous stuff that okra has on it. And so then I just, in a big Ziploc gallon baggie, I mix cornmeal, corn flour, and spices. I like onion powder, garlic powder, a little smoked paprika, maybe even a little cayenne or chili powder in there. And then I just take the wet, thawed okra, put it in the bag, shake it up, and then lay it out on some parchment paper on a cookie sheet and bake it in the oven at about 400 degrees. And just be patient with it because it is so wet, it takes time for that to get dry and to start to get crisp. So I just continue to bake it and stir it but it will get there. And I do quite a bit because it will shrink down. So if you do very much, you're going to not really have enough for your dinner or something. So I do at least 2 bags of frozen at a time, and we can usually polish that off at dinner. So my big thing when I'm working with people, or I do more talking at our other seminars because they usually don't run quite this long, but just talk about batch cooking, preparing your foods in advance, because you do have to be a little more prepared to eat this way. You can't just go to any restaurant and get good, healthy food, which I wish you could, but you can't. And so it's setting aside a couple hours on a weekend or whatever day works for you to, cook that pot of beans, cook a big pot of rice, make some soup, make some veggie burgers, bake some potatoes, wash and chop all your vegetables, have everything ready to go for the week. So when you come home from work, you're just not standing there starving to death wondering what in the world, how you going to, you want some rice, but it's going to take 45 minutes to cook. I mean, you don't have time for that. So you have to be prepared. Yes. Absolutely. Yeah. You have something at home cooked. And no matter what you do, even if you're just transitioning slowly and you're starting to cut other things out, I mean, certainly cooking your own food is always going to be healthier than driving through a drive-through or getting to go, from a restaurant. So just getting that mindset of learning to cook and prepare your own meals is very important. And that's why cooking big batches, like there's tons of veggie bean burger recipes out there. Find the one that you like. And when I make them, I make 20 burgers at a time. I don't mess around with 4 or 5 burgers. That's a waste of time to me. If you're going to go to the trouble of making them, make a ton of them because they freeze perfectly well. You come home from work, you can take those out of the freezer, pop them in the oven. If you've got some baked potatoes in the refrigerator, you can slice those up, pop those in the oven, and have oven-baked fries, and you have an easy meal. You can, if you've got a pot of beans cooked, certainly just beans and rice and some greens are an easy, perfect meal. You don't have to make it complicated. So just definitely being prepared is very important. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah, there's. Mm-hmm. Well, obviously, we didn't raise children on this because we started and our kids were fully grown. But I will tell you, our 2 grandchildren so far have been raised almost 100% plant-based. And my stepdaughter transitioned them from breast milk onto just, I think she uses almond milk. And they have done great and enjoyed that. And then, of course, add, the rice cereals and things like that into the milk as needed. But, I mean, our little granddaughter just turned 1, and she eats plates of black beans and rice and broccoli and all that kind of stuff. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I think they get more nutrition from the other things. Yeah. Right. The food, yes. Sure, yeah. And I do think it's crazy because, when we first started, our taste buds were in the same boat. I mean, that's what we had been eating, the standard foods. And so, day number one, were we just eating, massive amounts of kale? No, I mean, it didn't taste good to us. So it took a while of getting your taste buds to change, certainly, but I promise you they will. How long have you been plant-based? 3.5 months? I mean, the thing that I tell people is just if you're hungry, you need to eat, because the calorie difference in plant foods versus the other foods is significant. So if you're used to eating, when I was eating standard American diet, I had a mindset of, it was high fat food. And so I wanted very small portions and I was trying not to overeat. And so it took me a while to get rid of that mentality of how much food I could eat. And you definitely eat a lot bigger amounts of food because the calorie discrepancy is so much. So I just encourage, if you're hungry, you need to eat. Now, if you're starting to lose too much weight, like getting below, then I suggest, people start adding in more avocados, more seeds, more nuts, things like that. But you might try just increasing more of the higher calorie density foods like your starches, more beans, more potatoes, sweet potatoes, grains, things like that, because that'll keep you a little more satiated. Even when I make his big salad for lunch, I'm putting quinoa, garbanzo beans, along with all the vegetables in his salad, because just those vegetables is not going to keep him satiated for the whole entire day. I don't think that's true. No, I don't think that's true. Yeah. He said he's heard that if you're on a plant-based diet that you're going to lose muscle mass and gain fat. That doesn't make any sense. So, she asked what kind of rice I used. I use every kind of, I didn't even know how many different kinds of rices there were out there. Long grain brown rice, there's black rice, there's red rice, wild rice. At home, I do not use white rice. White rice is still to an effect a whole food, but it has been a lot more processed than, say, like long grain brown rice. But if we go out to eat and we eat, like a stir fry, like a veggie stir fry, a lot of times the only option is white rice. They're starting to carry brown rice at a lot of locations now. So I ask, and if they have the brown, that's what I want. But we would eat white rice in that occasion. Any other questions? I know it is overwhelming. Yes. Yes. The smoked paprika, well, she said, where do I buy it? So I have bought it at, there's actually different quality smoked paprikas, and the problem is you can't really smell them until after you get them home. But the kind I like is called Frontier Co-op, and they sell that brand at Natural Grocers and Whole Foods, but you can also order it on Amazon, and it's an oak wood smoked paprika. And when you open the lid on that, you can the smokiness is so strong, and that's what you want. I've bought some of those smoked paprikas in the store that just really don't have much flavor at all. So that is something I go through a lot of because it's really good to flavor your beans that you're cooking, like dried beans, like lima beans, pinto beans, black beans. I use it a lot. But then even with my green beans, things like that, I use the smoked paprika, and I use it in everything basically. I use nutritional yeast a lot, a lot. Yeah, I mean, well, I keep a shaker of it on the table. We put it on our baked potatoes. We put it on steamed broccoli and cauliflower. But it's used as kind of a cheese substitute. So I have a cheese sauce I make, and it's used in that a lot. Cashew base is what I use for most of my sauces. Yes. She had a... Yes. Mm-hmm. Yes. Yes, you can, and I've seen recipes where you can take nutritional yeast and blend it with almonds or even walnuts into a real fine kind of ground, and that's made kind of like a Parmesan cheese substitute. It's a good topping for your lasagna, different things like that. Going to like Whole Foods or something, natural grocers, yeah. Right, right, right. Because I go through a ton of it. Winco has it in bulk form. Very nice. Yes, ma'am. I do not have a cookbook, but the one cookbook I recommend getting started with, because it's my go-to cookbook and we've been doing this almost 9 years, and I still use it today. Her name is The Happy Herbivore. She's got multiple cookbooks, but the one cookbook I really like the best is called The Everyday Happy Herbivore, and it's just general recipes that take 30 minutes or less to make. They're all no oil. You may see things like nutritional yeast in there, so certainly that is something that you will want to look for. But they're very easy. The only thing I have criticized her for is that her recipes do not make very much. They're very small. It's her and her husband live at home, and I think that's what she's used to cooking for. So I double, triple, quadruple her recipes many times, especially for her veggie burgers or bean burgers. And she's got a ton of burger recipes in her book that are fantastic. There isn't a recipe in that book that I haven't made or that has not been good. So I highly recommend. You can get it on Amazon, absolutely. Everyday Happy Herbivore is the one I like, but she's got several and they're all good. So, okay, guys, I guess that's it. Grab some cookies. Thank you, Dee.